Robert Gardiner was a man of immense talent, a pioneer and father of 10 children. Robert's own father, James Gardiner, was born in 1808 in Edinburgh, Scotland. He was apprenticed in the trade of cooper or tinsmith, or one who makes coops, tubs, and casks. James was mechanically versatile in repairing household utensils, clocks, and items found in the home. After joining the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1848, James was seen holding street meetings in Dundee while the populace pelted him with stale eggs and vegetables. Robert's mother, Anne Gall, grew up in the picturesque seaside town of Stonehaven, Scotland. Anne and James married in 1838, 7 years before Robert was born. Dundee is the fourth largest city in Scotland. It lies within the eastern central lowlands on the north bank of the Firth of Tay, a large body of water which feeds into the North Sea. In the 1800s, Dundee mills converted from linen to jute, which sold at a quarter of the price of flax. In the 1800s, the Dundee harbor was known for its shipbuilding. Margaret's own father walked 6 blocks to work where he cut wood for ships in the Dundee harbor. Life was not easy in the Dundee tenements. The Gardiners were taxed on how many windows their apartment had. Robert Gardiner, son of James Gardiner and Anne Gall, was born in Liff, Dundee, Scotland, October 24th, 1845, the fourth child in a family of 10 children. Liff is a small village near Dundee, which eventually became a part of that city. Like most small towns in the British Isles, the Liff Church is in the center of town. This church was built in 1839, 6 years before Robert's birth. Robert Gardiner was baptized at 9 years, 10 months by John Macbeath in Aberdeen, Scotland. Robert is apprenticed at an early age to the trade of confectioner and baker and attained great proficiency in his chosen profession. At the age of 18, he was foreman of the Queen's Bakery, caterers to the royal family when it was in that part of the country. This recognition by royalty was considered a sign of honor, and they were entitled to display a special sign on their places of business signifying this singular honor. Margaret Stewart's family were visited by ward teachers in the Dundee branch. The 2 men called once a month. Margaret listened to their teachings and was quite surprised when one of them started writing poetry to her. She went with him 10 weeks when they decided to come to Zion. Her father said, "He is a fine young man, Maggie. Take him." She was 18 and Robert was 22 in June of 1868 when they left everything to come to Utah. Robert saved enough money for 2 adults and 1 child's passage and wanted Margaret to bring her younger brother, Robert, for company. But she thought it would be too selfish and insisted that he bring his youngest brother, Alfred, which he did. Robert and Margaret were married on the ship the first day it set sail, 20th of June, 1868. On Saturday, June 20th, 1868, the packet sailing ship Emerald Isle sailed from Liverpool with 876 saints under the direction of Hans Jensen Hals. Shortly after leaving port, great gales arose on the ocean, which buffeted them about for many days. The waves were mountainous, and many times the passengers feared they must be engulfed in the depths. In one of these terrible storms, they were driven far off their course, carried away tempestuously by the wind and waves near the Bay of Biscay off the shores of Spain. For days, shoals of sharks and birds followed the ship, awaiting the time when another poor, unfortunate creature, wrapped in a canvas shroud, would be slipped over the side to become a repast for these scavengers of the sea. The exhausted travelers arrived in New York August 11th. The company was detained 3 days in quarantine. Here at Castle Garden, New York, they made preparations for the railroad trip to Fort Benton, 700 miles west of Omaha, the point to which the Union Pacific Railroad was completed. Robert, Margaret, and Alfred stopped at Niagara Falls and crossed the suspension bridge on their way to Utah in August of 1868. Trains crossed on the top deck of the bridge, and pedestrians and carriages could cross on the deck underneath. This was probably the closest thing Robert and Margaret had to a honeymoon. He certainly wasn't crossing the Atlantic Ocean on a crowded ship with a sadistic crew and disease and death stalking them the whole way. At Fort Benton, they took ox teams the rest of the way to Salt Lake City. Margaret often related how she and her young companions walked beside the teams, plucking wildflowers which bordered the road in rich profusion as they sang songs that carried their memories back to their native land of brown heath and shaggy wood, or the songs of Zion, which had awakened in their souls the anticipated beauties of their prospective home in the mountains. Many years later, one of her children asked her, "Would you not like to go back to Scotland?" "No," she answered. "Oh, maybe for a visit, but this to me is the land of Zion. Here I wish to live in the fellowship of the saints of God." Before entering the valley, they stopped in Echo Canyon to work on the railroad. Margaret helped with the cooking. It was late fall when they came into Salt Lake, riding down Parley's Canyon on a load of coal. Some good woman let them have a room in her house, which they fixed up pretty well, so they were quite comfortable. In August, Robert was ordained an elder and sealed to Margaret the same day. Here, their first child, Robert Stewart Gardiner, was born in October 1869. In February of 1870, spring came, or so it seemed to them, and they moved into a dugout in one of the many ravines on the east bench. Here, Robert built a huge adobe furnace and started his candy making. He would carry a sack of sugar home on his shoulder, make candy all night, and take it downtown on his shoulder again, the next morning bringing another sack of sugar back. Robert was a man of remarkable physique. His physical energy seemed boundless, and during his long life he engaged in a number of business ventures. Upon his arrival in the valley, he was of course anxious to establish himself in his chosen trade of confectioner and baker. After locating at the corner of 2nd Avenue and D Street, one of his first investments was the purchase of a wheelbarrow. This he used after building a small candy factory to transport sugar from downtown to his shop, where he made it into candy and delivered it to the stores, where he received merchandise and more sugar in payment for the candy. While living at 2nd Avenue and D Street, Robert was under the necessity of hauling water in barrels by means of a horse and wagon. While doing this, of necessity on Sunday, he was thrown from the wagon and run over. But he was all right. Robert, being quite successful as confectioner and baker, sent the passage money to emigrate his parents to Utah. They only remained a few years. Margaret overheard her mother-in-law say, "We came here expecting to see the gilded towers of Zion, but we only found mud dikes instead." So, seeking greener pastures for themselves, they went to St. Catharines in Canada, not far from Buffalo, New York. James died a couple of years later in 1878, and Anne lived another 10 more years and died in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In the process of time and by his industry and energy, Robert was able to establish himself in the downtown section where he built a flourishing business in the manufacture of all kinds of confections. A new home was built in the 14th Ward near the center of the block immediately behind where Kern's building now stands, where the older members of his family were born. Robert advertised his Deseret Bakery in the local newspapers. He sold Gardiner's Monster Cake at 50 cents per pound, which will have gold rings in it like raisins. He also sold shortbread, genuine Scotch, made in the highest style of art. Robert operated a bakery and a restaurant on Main Street. Robert's restaurant was located at 58 South Main Street, Salt Lake City, just a half a block south of Temple Square. Robert sold first-class restaurant meals at all hours for only 25 cents. He also wholesaled confectionery and candies, and both homemade and imported. Robert sold ice cream in his restaurant. His candy business flourished. It is fortunate that Robert brought his candy making molds from Scotland. Robert used this machine to make lemon drops, and the machine in the background made candy ropes. Robert was well known for his hard candy animals. The molds are still in use today in the family and were very popular at the 2011 Robert and Margaret family reunion in Salt Lake City. In 1879, Robert became a bona fide citizen of the United States. In 1880, Robert and Margaret attended church at the 14th Ward in downtown Salt Lake City. For relaxation and fun, Robert played checkers. At this time, checkers was very popular, and the game results were published in the local newspaper. It was a great accomplishment for Robert to be the 1881 Checker Champion of Utah. He won $50. For Christmas in 1882, Robert gave a copy of the Book of Mormon as a gift to his brother Alfred. This is a photo postcard of Robert riding on a cowcatcher of a steam engine locomotive. In 1885, Robert spent some time working on the Salt Lake Temple. In 1890, Robert invented a process of leaching copper from copper-bearing ore. A number of mines in Utah and other states were destined to use this process. About 1890, a severe depression occurred. After an unprecedented business boom which caused widespread disaster in the industrial and financial status of the country, fortunes were wiped out, and many heretofore independent citizens were reduced to want and extreme poverty. The Gardiner farm was lost, investments failed, and the accumulated assets of years were wiped out. By 1894, Robert's son Clarence Gardiner described this period of time as one of extreme poverty and want. In 1893, Robert and Margaret attended the Salt Lake City Temple dedication. The Salt Lake Temple was dedicated on April 6, 1893 by Wilford Woodruff, the fourth president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The dedication ceremonies took place in 31 sessions between April 6th and the 24th, 1893. It was estimated that at least 75,000 people attended. In 1894, Robert is said to have allowed his horse to stand tied to a post for 14 hours without any food or drink. He was arrested and cited for cruelty to animals and later was arrested again on a bench warrant. He was fined $5 and $20 in costs. This is the Robert and Margaret Gardiner family in 1900. Left to right, back, Charles Stewart, Clarence Leroy, Frederick. Front row, Robert, Eva Winifred, Margaret Stewart, Beatrice Lenore, and William Francis. Their oldest child, Margaret, was married and not included. The enumerator for the 1900 Denver, Colorado U.S. Census lists 54-year-old Robert Gardner as a lodger at 1755 Lawrence Street on June 1st. Robert's occupation is listed as chemist. On November 8, 1901, the Articles of Incorporation of the Clara Copper Mining and Milling Company are filed at the clerk's office, Salt Lake County, Utah. The amount of stock subscribed by Robert is listed at 25,000 shares at 10 cents per share. 7 lode mines claims located near Moab, near Arches and Canyonlands Park, have been purchased by the corporation. In 1902, Clara Mining owns a butte about 2,000 square feet in Grand County, Utah, near Moab. They have already completed a 100-ton leaching mill requiring an expenditure of about $1,500. The Gardner process, when applied in certain copper ores, will reduce the ore to 93% pure copper in 30 minutes at a cost for the leaching, if not more than 50 cents a ton. Later in 1902, a modified Gardner process was used at mines of the Clara Copper Mining and Milling Company, but it was found to be too costly. Robert for some time resumed his former trade of candy making, but never achieved the success he enjoyed in the earlier years. Times were indeed hard, but by diligent effort and help afforded by the older children, a degree of success was achieved, and the future became brighter. A new home was made in the 11th Ward, which remained the family abode at 43 Alameda Avenue. The purchase price was $1,200. This is the assembly hall for the 11th Ward of the church, located at 500 East, 100 South. The Gardners attended church here. Here are Robert's daughter-in-law, Hope Hewlett Gardner's thoughts on why Robert had such great difficulties. I'm sure that Grandpa Gardner was a man of high standards and was efficient in his chosen occupation. He, of course, wanted to be able to raise his family and so that they could have a good education, enjoy a comfortable way of life. At one time, he was well-to-do, but some friends got in with him and them on a speculation scheme. They managed to get the deal swung in their favor, and he was left out and broke. That experience made a great difference in the lives of the parents and children. By 1910, Robert and Margaret had only 2 children at home, including Charles, age 24, and Beatrice, age 18. In 1913, Robert's previously owned Brighton 200-acre farm resells for $25,000. On September 5th, 1914, Robert was heard to say during the week, "I play checkers for pleasure." Robert poses a checker problem and the solution in the Salt Lake City Evening Telegram. We called at the Builders Association the other day and found a large number of men playing the game and a few playing chess. Our good friend Gardner was there also. mopping the earth with the players. It was very refreshing to see how cordially the players invited us to sit down and take the measure of our friend, and how cordially they hoped we might get the best of him, and cheered every time we came out ahead, which was not very often. We are sorry to say that Gardner is a hard nut to crack, and the best of it is that he applauds a good game or fine shot that is sprung on him almost as much as he does winning a game himself. No nasty jealousy there, and that is why everybody enjoys playing with him. Sadly, Margaret, the wife of his youth and the mother of his 10 children, passed away from pneumonia February 4th, 1917, at 43 Alameda Avenue. Present at the time was one of her daughters, Margaret Emilian Gedge, and two of her sons, Clarence Leroy Gardner and Charles Stewart Gardner. Robert is at work in some sort of factory. He's the fifth from the left. Here is an interesting postcard photo of Robert on the back of a horse. This trek would be a major undertaking for a young man to travel over so many mountains to reach Rock Creek and back again. However, it seems almost impossible for a 74-year-old man. This is a photo of Robert with his son-in-law William Reams Gedge and great-grandson Robert Lynn Layton, and Robert Gardner with granddaughter Leone Gardner Gedge Layton and great-grandson Robert Lynn Layton. By June of 1926, Robert cannot take care of himself as a result of a stroke, and he moves in with his son Clarence Leroy Gardner's family at 928 Hollywood Avenue. In March 1927, Robert Gardner falls down the cellar steps at Clarence's home and is taken to the hospital. In the hospital, Robert dies as a result of septicemia from Dipicus ulcers at the age of 81. Robert Gardner's daughter, Eva Winifred Cushing, is the only person with him at the time of his passing. His death certificate says he has been retired for 20 years. Robert Gardner is buried in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. All of Robert's living children are at the funeral. Nearby is the headstone for W. W. Phelps, who wrote The Spirit of God and Praise to the Man and other famous Mormon hymns. Robert Gardner lived a long, vigorous, and rather eventful life. It is a great honor to have Robert as my great-grandfather. It may truthfully be said of him that while not attaining a position of fame, he performed his part in the development and building of this inland empire. He was a man of generous impulses and died in the fellowship of the faithful.